Good afternoon, I'm Abe.
And I'm Frank. And today, we're adumbrating the first half of Chapter 12, the Second War for Independence and the Upsurge of Nationalism, in Kennedy, Cohen, and Bailey's The American Pageant textbook. Joining us today, we have a special guest.
Sir, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Uncle Sam.
Well, Uncle Sam, take us away.
With pleasure. So, in the first section, on to Canada, overland, and lakes. The main lesson of the War of 1812 was to not attempt to lead a divided people into war. However, the Americans left the war with a renewed sense of nationhood, to later feelings of nationalism. But let's talk about the war itself. British forces were weakest in Canada, up in the north, and the Americans had focused their efforts on capturing Montreal instead of attacking Niagara, Detroit, and Lake Champlain. They would have killed off the main British center of population and transportation. So, when more American land invasions of Canada proved unsuccessful, the Americans turned to the sea. American frigates known as Old Ironsides had heavier firepower and thicker sides than those ships of the British. So, Oliver Hazard Perry built a fleet of ships on Lake Erie, and then was able to capture a British fleet, infusing new hopes into the drooping hearts of the American people. All was not favorable for the Americans, though. The U.S. had entered the war counting on Napoleon's assistance. But, unfortunately, since he had been exiled to Elba, Americans had to face the British all alone. Not good. So, the British planned an attack in 1814 on New York. However, a weaker American fleet, under the great leadership of Thomas McDonough's command, defeated the British in the Battle of Pittsburgh in northern New York. As a result, Upper New York and New England were saved from their conquest, and the Union was saved from future disillusion. So, Frank, where did the British turn next in their battles?
Well, after losing in the north, the British decided to send 4,000 troops to Washington, D.C. itself. In August of 1814, the British set fire to much of the city, including the White House and Congress. However, the Americans fought back against the British at Fort McHenry in Baltimore, with the battle becoming the inspiration for Francis Scott Key's The Star-Spangled Banner. Additionally, Andrew Jackson managed to fend off the British invasion of the Mississippi Valley and led his troops to slaughter 2,000 redcoats, while only taking 70 casualties at the Battle of New Orleans. Ironically, a peace treaty had been signed in Belgium 2 weeks before this critical battle was even fought, giving Americans a nationalistic rather than militaristic cause for celebration. One major negative effect was the British naval blockade, which harmed American shipping and fishing throughout the entire war. But Abe, can you tell me more about the peace treaty that ended the War of 1812?
Yes, so 5 American envoys, led by the puritanical John Quincy Adams, met at the Belgian city of Ghent in 1814 to discuss the terms of peace for the War of 1812. Initially, the British claimed parts of conquered Maine and made demands for control of the Great Lakes and the formation of a neutralized Indian buffer state. These terms were flatly rejected by the Americans. The British had grown war-weary and were preoccupied with redrawing the territories of Europe at the Congress of Vienna, so the British became more prone to ceding to the Americans' desires. And the ensuing Treaty of Ghent in 1814, both the British and Americans simply agreed to cease the fighting and to restore all the conquered territories. None of the American grievances, such as the Orders in Council, impressment, and confiscations, were addressed. The war ended in a virtual draw. So, Uncle Sam, could you tell me about some of the effects of the War of 1812?
I'd love to tell you about that. So, in a manifestation of the Federalist hatred for Republican government, New England hosted the Hartford Convention, which lasted from December 15, 1814 to January 5, 1815. Here, Federalist extremists met to discuss their grievances and to seek redress for their wrongs. They wanted money from Washington to make up for lost trade, 2, a 2/3 congressional vote in order to pass embargoes, and 3, a small minority wanted secession. However, in the aftermath of the victory at New Orleans, they garnered no support and quickly faded away, along with the Federalist Party. So, Frank, why was the War of 1812 important?
Well, the War of 1812 was, in terms of numbers of soldiers, very small. But American nationalism made huge gains during the War of 1812, as America showed it would fight for what was right and what it believed in, and American diplomats from then on were treated with increased respect. Additionally, Due to the British blockade, manufacturing throughout America increased, and reliance on foreign workshops and factories consequently decreased. Resentment was still strong between the US and Britain in 1817, and a heated naval arms race on the Great Lakes was only averted by the Rush-Bagot Treaty, which limited naval strength on the lakes and in effect created the world's longest unfortified boundary between the US and Canada. But Frank, can you explain to me more about how the War of 1812 increased nationalism?
Gladly. The most prominent result of the War of 1812 was increased nationalism in America. American literature developed, and Americans such as Washington Irving and James Fenimore Cooper were internationally recognized. Finance was also affected, and a revived Bank of the United States was created by Congress in 1816. Furthermore, the Army was expanded, and the Navy was glorified when it quashed the pirate plunderers of North Africa. So, Uncle Sam, could you tell me how protectionism developed in the Americas?
Gladly. So, following the war, the British dumped their trading goods into America at cheap prices. American infant industries were bawling for some form of protectionism, so America passed the Tariff of 1816, the first American tariff instituted for protectionism rather than revenue. Furthermore, Henry Clay developed a scheme known as the American System. It had three main parts. First, developing a powerful banking system to provide credit. Second, passing a protective tariff. The revenues from the tariff would provide funds for the third, constructing a system of roads and canals, focusing construction on the Great Ohio River Valley. So Congress voted to give $1.5 million to the states to pay for the internal improvements, but Madison deemed it unconstitutional and vetoed it. New England, more than any other region, opposed the federal construction of roads/canals, since they believed it would drain their own population and create competing states. So, Frank, can you give me the lowdown on the Monroe presidency?
Absolutely. James Monroe defeated his Federalist opponent in a vote of 183 to 34 Electoral College votes, and ushered in a short period of one-party rule, since the Federalist Party was on such decline. He straddled the generations of the Founding Fathers and the new age of nationalism. Early in 1817, Monroe took on a goodwill tour, venturing deep into New England, where he received heartwarming welcomes, even from his Federalist opponents. A Boston newspaper even went on to declare that an era of good feelings had begun. However, seeds of sectional troubles were being planted even as this era of good feelings bloomed. Notably, the South did not like the tariff, saying that it only benefited the North and made the South pay higher prices. And the South disliked the internal improvements linking the North and West. The South didn't see any benefits in paying taxes for roads and canals that are happening in other states. But Abe, can you elaborate on the Panic of 1819 and extrapolate on what Monroe did to stop it?
Yes, so America fell out of the era of good feelings and into the Panic of 1819. The panic was caused by the Bank of the United States over-speculation or over-investment in the frontier lands. The bank also foreclosed mortgages on many farms and began to imprison debtors. The western part of the United States was affected most harshly. Overall, the Bank of the United States became known as a financial devil. Thank you for watching. Please like,
subscribe,
comment if you have any questions, and we'll catch you guys next time.